She stood on her front porch facing a wall of police officers, her voice soft but steady. "Please, just let us breathe for a moment, that's all," she said. It was one sentence. The response came back harsh and loud. "Your property? Don't make me laugh. What did you do? Sell crack until you could fake a mortgage? Get your lying ass off that porch before I drag you off it." The captain kept going, his voice thick with contempt. "Women like you don't build anything. You steal it or you spread your legs for it." Dozens of officers stood behind him, some grinning. A neighbor across the street was live streaming the whole thing, the caption reading, "Finally cleaning up the block." Another muttered, "Took them long enough." No one objected. Phones were out, smirks everywhere. One black woman surrounded, humiliated, completely alone. But not one soul on that street had any idea what was coming. By the next day, every badge on that lawn would be worthless. Let me take you back to the beginning. Before the sirens, before the line of squad cars, before any of it. Helen Carter woke early, as she always did. No alarm needed. Decades in the United States Army had rewired her body clock for good. She made her bed first, hospital corners, sheets tight enough to bounce a quarter off. Old habits like that never left. Her bedroom was simple, clean white walls, an oak dresser her late husband had built by hand. On top of it sat a folded American flag in a triangle case, the one from his funeral. She touched the glass every morning, just with her fingertips. She never skipped that. She walked downstairs. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows onto the granite countertops. She brewed coffee, black, no sugar, strong the way she liked it, and looked out at her backyard garden. 3 varieties of roses, red, white, and yellow. She had planted every one herself on her hands and knees in the Georgia clay. Thorns had scarred her palms, but she didn't care. Those roses were hers. This house was hers. She had earned every square inch of it. Because Helen Carter wasn't just any retiree tending roses in a quiet suburb. She was a retired Brigadier General, a West Point graduate. She had completed 2 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan and earned a Bronze Star for valor under fire. After retiring from the Army, she took a position few people even know exists. Senior Civilian Advisor to the Under-Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. She worked directly with the Pentagon and held a top-secret SCI clearance. The documents in her home office carried classification headers that would make most people's eyes water. But on the street, you saw a black woman in gardening gloves and a sun hat. And for some people in Fairview, Georgia, that was enough. Fairview was a pretty suburb about 40 minutes south of Atlanta. The Oak Hill neighborhood was its nicest area, with big lawns, stone mailboxes, and 2-car garages. The kind of place that puts a welcome sign at the entrance but means it selectively. On paper, the town was progressive. But the police department told a different story. There had been excessive force complaints in recent years, both involving black residents, both quietly settled with non-disclosure agreements. No officer disciplined, no report made public. The man responsible had a name, Captain David Pruitt. He ran the patrol division for many years, square jaw, buzz cut so tight it looked painted on. He called his style proactive policing. What that meant was simple. Any neighborhood that started to diversify got extra patrols, more stops, more questions. He once told a fellow officer, "You let one in, 10 follow. I'm just keeping standards." His boss, Deputy Chief Paul Granger, never questioned him. Rubber stamp? No oversight. They ran that department like a private club. Helen had lived in the Oak Hill neighborhood for several years without a single police interaction. She kept to herself and waved to neighbors. Her closest friend on the street was Linda Morrison, a white woman across the road. They shared gardening tips and drank iced tea on weekends, Linda was the kind of neighbor who noticed things. One afternoon, Helen was expecting a delivery. New patio furniture, a teak set she had ordered some time earlier. The truck arrived and two men unloaded several large boxes onto her driveway. Normal delivery, signature required. But 3 houses down, someone was watching. A white neighbor saw the boxes. He didn't see furniture, he saw a black woman receiving what he decided was a suspicious number of packages. He picked up his phone and called the Fairview police. Suspicious activity, a lot of boxes being unloaded. Doesn't look right. That call reached Captain Pruitt's desk within minutes, and instead of sending one patrol car, standard procedure for an unverified anonymous tip, Pruitt smiled, leaned back, and said 4 words. "I've had my eye on that property." He ordered a full tactical response, dozens of officers and a K-9 unit, all for a furniture delivery. As evening approached, Helen was inside unpacking the first box when she heard the sound of engines, low at first, like distant thunder. Then it grew, engine after engine. She set down the box cutter and walked to her front window. What she saw made her stomach drop. A long line of police cruisers was turning onto her street, lights flashing. They kept coming, red and blue lights bouncing off every garage door on the block. Then came the K-9 unit, a black SUV with a German shepherd barking behind the cage. She could hear that deep, angry bark from inside the house. Radios crackled, doors slammed, boots hit asphalt. Officers poured out and fanned across her lawn like an advancing platoon, hands on holsters, eyes locked forward. Helen's heart hammered, but she didn't panic. Decades of combat training had taught her one thing above all. Panic is the enemy. Stay still. Assess. Respond. She opened her front door and stepped onto the porch. The air smelled like exhaust and hot asphalt. She stood straight, shoulders square, hands visible at her sides, every movement deliberate, every breath controlled. Captain David Pruitt walked toward her porch like he owned it. Slow, heavy steps, thumbs hooked in his duty belt, a toothpick between his teeth. Officer James Foley followed behind him. Pruitt stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at her, then at the house, then back at her. His eyes moved like he was appraising livestock. "We received a report of criminal activity at this address," he said. "No greeting, no identification, no badge number, just a flat, cold sentence." Helen kept her voice level. "I'm the homeowner. What criminal activity are you referring to?" Pruitt tilted his head, slow and exaggerated. Then he smiled. Not a warm smile, the kind that says he had already decided who she was. "The homeowner," he repeated. He glanced at Foley. "You hear that, James? She says she's the homeowner." Foley said nothing. Pruitt turned back to her. "Mum, I've been working in this area a long time. I know every house on this block. I know who built them, who bought them, and who belongs in them." He let the word hang. Belongs. "And I have to be honest with you, something about this picture doesn't add up." Helen felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept it locked down. "Officer, I've lived here for several years. My name is on the deed. If you'd like to verify that, you're welcome to contact the county clerk." Pruitt ignored her. He turned to Foley. "Run the address, pull the deed records, and run her name too. I want everything." Then he stepped up onto the porch, close enough that she could smell the stale coffee on his breath, and his shadow fell across her face. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, voice low. "You're going to step aside. My officers are going to enter this residence and conduct a security sweep. If everything checks out, we'll be on our way." Helen didn't move. "Do you have a warrant?" "I don't need a warrant when I have probable cause." "An anonymous phone call about packages is not probable cause, Captain. You know that." Something shifted in Pruitt's face. The fake politeness vanished. Raw contempt took its place. His jaw tightened. He leaned closer. "Let me make this real simple for you. I've got dozens of officers on this lawn. I've got a K9 unit ready to go. And I've got a report that says something illegal is happening inside this house. Now you can cooperate, or I can arrest you for obstruction and we go inside anyway. Your choice." Helen held his stare. "I am not obstructing anything. I am exercising my constitutional rights. You are standing on my property without a warrant, without verified probable cause, and without my consent. I am asking you, formally, to leave." Pruitt stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped back off the porch. For one brief moment she thought it was over. Reason had won. It hadn't. Pruitt turned to the officers on the lawn and raised his hand. He pointed 2 fingers left, 2 fingers right. Officers moved instantly, heading around both sides of the house without asking permission. Helen's voice sharpened. "Those officers do not have permission to go around my house. Call them back." Pruitt didn't turn around. "Securing the perimeter. Standard procedure." "There is nothing standard about this." He ignored her. He raised his radio. "Bring the dog to the front door. We're going to let him take a sniff." The K9 handler walked the German Shepherd toward the porch. The dog pulled hard, claws scraping concrete, bark echoing off every house. Neighbors had come outside. Linda Morrison stood on her lawn recording every second, face pale. An older white couple, 2 doors down, watched with arms crossed. A man in a golf shirt shook his head, but said nothing. Nobody helped. Nobody spoke up. They just watched. The dog sniffed the doorframe, the threshold, the welcome mat. It circled once, twice. Nothing. No alert. Tail wagging, ears neutral. But the handler wasn't done. Helen saw the small movement. He shifted his knee and tapped the dog's left flank, a trained cue. The dog sat and barked twice, a false alert, made to order. Pruitt turned to her with the satisfaction of a man who had rigged the game. "Dog alerted. We're going in." Helen's voice was steel. "That dog did not alert. Your handler cued him. I watched it happen." Pruitt stepped past her. "Ma'am, step aside or you will be moved." 2 officers flanked her. One grabbed her arm, the other her shoulder. They guided her firmly down the steps onto the walkway. She stood on grass she mowed herself outside a house she paid for in full, surrounded by armed men who had no legal right to be there. Officer Foley was told to stay with her. He stood beside her, jaw tight, breathing shallow. Something about this didn't sit right with him. Pruitt walked through her front door without removing his boots. His officers followed. Just like that, it was no longer her home. It was their crime scene built on a furniture delivery and a phone call from a man who saw boxes and saw colour. Inside, it sounded like a demolition crew. Cabinet doors slammed, drawers yanked out and dumped. Glass shattered in the kitchen. Helen heard every crash from the lawn, her body tensing. Every sound was a violation. Every thud a message. This is ours now. Upstairs, officers tore through her bedroom. They shoved hangers aside, dumped the oak dresser her late husband had built by hand. Socks, scarves, undergarments scattered like debris. The triangle case with the folded American flag was knocked sideways, moved from the exact spot she touched every morning. In the living room, cushions ripped off, bookshelf emptied, photo frames crashed. One cracked across a picture of Helen in dress uniform at the Pentagon, decades of service face down, in broken glass. Then they reached her home office. An officer found the stack of folders stamped top secret //SCI//NOFORN. He flipped one open casually. The classification headers were impossible to miss. He called out, "Captain, there's folders in here with government markings all over them." Pruitt walked in, picked one up, glanced at the stamps, then tossed it back like junk mail. "Government markings, please." She probably printed these herself to look important. "You can fake anything with a color printer and 10 minutes on Google." He tossed another. The pages fanned out across the desk. Real classified briefings with real code words and operational data, now contaminated by fingerprints of men with no clearance and no understanding of what they were touching. Helen called out from the lawn. "Those documents are federally classified. Your officers are committing a felony by handling them. Stop immediately." Pruitt appeared at the door, arms crossed, looking down at her like entertainment. "Classified? You expect me to believe a woman like you has classified government documents in her little home office? I don't need you to believe it. I need you to stop breaking the law." Pruitt smiled that same rotten smile. "Sweetheart, the only law being broken here is whatever hustle you've been running to afford a place like this. And trust me, we're going to find it." Before he turned back inside, another officer came down the stairs holding a United States Army dress uniform on a hanger, dark blue jacket, gold buttons, a single silver star on the shoulder. "Captain found this in the master bedroom closet, military uniform with a star on it." Pruitt stopped. He looked at the uniform, then at Helen, then back at the uniform, and he laughed. A deep, real laugh from the belly. "A general's uniform in her closet." He shook his head, wiping his eye. "Probably picked it up at a thrift store or a costume shop. Halloween was months ago, sweetheart." Officers on the porch laughed with him. One pulled out his phone and snapped a photo for the group chat. Helen said nothing. Her face didn't change, but her hands at her sides closed slowly into fists. Not from rage, from discipline. The discipline of a woman who had commanded soldiers through combat zones and never raised her voice in anger. She wasn't going to start now. Pruitt came down the steps and stopped inches from her face. She could see the veins in his neck, smell the stale coffee and cheap aftershave. "Let me tell you what I think happened here," he said quietly. "I think you got yourself into something dirty. Drugs, fraud, stolen goods. I don't know which one yet, but I will find out. And when I do, I'm going to personally walk you off this property in handcuffs in front of every neighbor on this street. Because women like you don't earn places like this. You take them, you cheat for them, or you spread your legs for someone who can." Helen held his gaze. "Are you finished?" "Not even close." He pointed at her rose garden. "Those will look real nice when the new owners move in." Then he spat his toothpick onto her walkway and turned back toward the house. "Foley, take her phone. Bag it as potential evidence." Foley hesitated. "Captain, she hasn't been charged with anything." "Did I stutter? Take the damn phone. Now." Foley walked over. He wouldn't meet her eyes. She placed the phone in his palm herself. He set it on the hood of a cruiser. Her only line of communication gone. But what none of them knew was that Helen had already made one call. Minutes earlier, while they were distracted, she had dialed a Pentagon number she knew by heart. Colonel Edward Walsh's direct line. The call connected in 2 rings. She spoke 6 words. "Edward, I need you. Trace my location." Then she ended the call and slipped the phone away before anyone noticed. By now the sun had dropped. Streetlights came on, casting yellow pools across the trampled lawn. The tension was thick, the whole street holding its breath. Inside, officers were still tearing through rooms. Something heavy hit the floor upstairs like a gunshot. Helen flinched once, then went still. Across the street, Linda Morrison kept recording, battery low, hands shaking but camera steady. A news van arrived. A reporter and cameraman stepped out and took in the scene. But the most important thing wasn't on that street. It was happening miles away at the Pentagon. Colonel Edward Walsh had set down his phone and picked up a red one. His face was stone. The call he was about to make would end David Pruitt's career, and everything he thought he was entitled to. Sometime later, Pruitt's radio crackled. He was in Helen's living room flipping through a photo album, looking for something incriminating. Dispatcher's voice sounded tight. "Captain Pruitt, I have an incoming call patched through from the Pentagon, Department of Defense, requesting the commanding officer on scene. Immediately. The living room went quiet. Officers froze. The word Pentagon hung in the air. Pruitt stared at his radio, thumb hovering. Then he keyed the mic. "Patch it through." A calm, cold voice came through. "This is Colonel Edward Walsh, United States Army, Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. Identify yourself." Pruitt swallowed. "Captain David Pruitt, Fairview Police Department, commanding officer on scene." "I know where you are, Captain, and I know exactly what you're doing." Walsh didn't raise his voice. Every word landed like a hammer. "The woman whose home you are inside, without a warrant, without probable cause, and without authorization, is Brigadier General Helen Carter, United States Army, retired. She serves as senior civilian advisor to the Under-Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. She holds a top-secret SCI clearance. She reports directly to officials who brief the Secretary of Defense." Pruitt's face drained of color. His jaw went slack. His eyes widened like a man watching his house burn. Walsh continued, "General Carter outranks your mayor. She outranks your chief of police. She outranks everyone in your chain of command. Your officers are handling classified national security documents without clearance. Do you understand the severity of what I just told you?" Pruitt opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "The FBI has been notified. Agents are en route. Until they arrive, you will order every officer out of that house immediately. You will not remove a single document, item, or photograph. You will secure the scene and wait." Pruitt tried to speak, voice cracking. "Colonel, we were responding to a legitimate—" Walsh cut him off. "You conducted a warrantless search of a federal official's residence. You detained her without cause. You allowed uncleared personnel to access top-secret materials. And based on what General Carter reported, your officers have also destroyed personal property, used a fabricated K-9 alert, and made repeated racially motivated statements. Save your explanations for the investigators, Captain. You're going to need them." The radio went dead. Pruitt stood holding it, face the color of old paper, breathing shallow. Officers frozen around him. The house that had been full of noise was now silent as a church. Outside, the news cameras zoomed in as officers began walking out, heads down, hands empty. Pruitt emerged last. He looked across the lawn at Helen. She stood exactly where they had left her, back straight, expression unchanged. She didn't gloat. She didn't shout. She just looked at him. And for the first time in years wearing that badge, David Pruitt looked away first. Helen walked up her own porch steps, crossed her own threshold, and stepped back into her own home. She closed the door gently behind her, like nothing had happened, like she had all the time in the world, because she did. The FBI arrived soon after. 2 black Suburbans with no sirens, no lights. 4 agents stepped out. The lead was Special Agent Rebecca Stone. She walked past every officer, entered the house, surveyed the damage, and came out with a camera full of photographs. She walked straight to Pruitt. "Produce your warrant for this search." Pruitt stammered about probable cause from the tip and the K-9. "Produce the warrant, Captain." "There is no warrant. You entered a federal official's residence with an active top-secret SCI clearance without a signed warrant. What was your documented probable cause? An anonymous, unverified tip about packages. That wouldn't justify a single officer knocking on the door, let alone what I documented inside." Pruitt said nothing. "Your badge and service weapon. Now, you are suspended effective immediately pending federal investigation." Every officer watched. The news camera stayed tight. Pruitt unclipped his badge, cleared his weapon, and placed everything in her hand, fingers trembling. Stone turned to the others. "Everyone who entered that residence provides a full written statement tonight. Anyone who refuses will be detained as a material witness." Silence, then slow nods. Officer Foley stepped forward first. "I want to cooperate fully." He gave a complete statement detailing Pruitt's pre-raid comments, the phrase, "I've had my eye on that property," the knee tap on the dog, the racial slurs, the thrift store joke. Other officers followed. Their statements confirmed a long pattern of targeting people of color, with the full knowledge of the chain of command. Deputy Chief Paul Granger was reached by phone. He tried to distance himself. "I didn't authorize that level of response." But his electronic signature was on the deployment order, time-stamped and logged. Pruitt was escorted to an unmarked federal vehicle. The door closed with a heavy, final sound. As the vehicle passed Helen's porch, she stood with arms folded. Pruitt looked at her through the window. "General, I was just doing my job." Her voice carried clear. "Your job? You brought dozens of officers to a black woman's home because someone saw a furniture truck. You called me a thrift store general. You told me I spread my legs to afford my house. You spat on my walkway and threatened my roses. That wasn't your job, Captain. That was your character. And now it's your permanent record." The vehicle disappeared around the corner. Behind her, Linda Morrison started clapping. Then the older couple, then more neighbors, then the whole block. Helen nodded once and went inside. By the next day, the story was everywhere. Linda uploaded her footage late that night. No caption needed. Dozens of squad cars on a quiet street. A black woman alone on her lawn. A white police captain laughing at a general's uniform and calling it a thrift store costume. The video spread rapidly. News networks picked it up. The clip of Pruitt holding the uniform became the defining image. Outrage followed. Helen's military record surfaced. West Point, graduate, combat deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, Bronze Star for leading a convoy through an ambush and bringing every soldier home alive. Promoted to Brigadier General, one of the highest-ranking black women in Army history at the time of her retirement. The contrast was devastating. A woman who had bled for her country, earned a star through long service, treated like a criminal on her own lawn because a neighbor saw boxes and skin color. Veterans organizations condemned the raid. The VFW called it a disgrace to everyone who has worn the uniform. The American Legion followed. Thousands of service members, active and retired, posted videos saying the same thing. She served. She sacrificed. And this is what she came home to. Members of Congress demanded investigations. The Congressional Black Caucus held a press conference with her military portrait beside the screenshot of Pruitt laughing. The FBI investigation expanded. Agents subpoenaed years of records under Pruitt's command. The numbers told a clear story. Black and Latino residents made up a small percentage of the population, but accounted for the vast majority of traffic stops, vehicle searches, and use of force incidents. Every number pointed the same direction. Internal complaints from officers of color described racial profiling quotas and retaliation. Everyone had been reviewed by Deputy Chief Granger and marked unfounded. The K-9 handler, Officer Daniel Voss, was investigated separately. In recent years, his dog had alerted during dozens of searches. The vast majority involved people of color. Only a small number produced contraband. An independent expert concluded the alerts were coming from the handler, not the dog. The tipster, Harold Finch, was identified through phone records. When confronted, he admitted he called because he saw a black woman receiving large packages and assumed it was suspicious. He had never spoken to Helen. He didn't know her name. He just saw what he wanted to see. The federal trial began several months later. United States versus David Pruitt. Charges included deprivation of civil rights under color of law, unlawful search and seizure, unauthorized access to classified information, filing false reports, and conspiracy. The defense argued standard procedure and called character witnesses. The prosecution played Linda's full video. The jury watched every second. When it reached Pruitt calling the uniform a costume, one juror closed her eyes and shook her head. Another wrote something down and underlined it twice. The jury deliberated for several hours, guilty on every count. Sentencing came weeks later. Judge Arthur Klein addressed Pruitt directly. He said what happened on Helen Carter's lawn was not isolated. It was the visible peak of a system designed to degrade and control people based on skin color. Systems like that survive only because men like Pruitt operate without consequence. He sentenced him to 10 years in federal prison, no parole for the first 8. Pruitt stared straight ahead while his wife sobbed. He didn't move, didn't blink. Deputy Chief Paul Granger was convicted as an accessory and sentenced to 4 years. Officer Daniel Voss received 6 years for civil rights violations. 3 other officers got permanent suspensions and lifetime bans from law enforcement. The city entered a federal consent decree requiring complete overhaul, new hiring standards, mandatory bias training, civilian oversight board, body cameras on every officer. Mayor William Foster resigned amid a recall petition with thousands of signatures. A civil rights lawsuit on Helen's behalf settled for $12 million. She donated every cent to establish a legal defense fund for victims of police misconduct across Georgia. The fund was operational within months. Several months later, Helen sat before a United States Senate subcommittee. The room was packed, cameras lined the back wall. She wore a simple navy suit, her West Point ring catching the light. She spoke without notes, describing the sound of dozens of engines, the smell of exhaust, the feeling of being grabbed on her own porch and moved aside like furniture. She described Pruitt's face when he laughed at her uniform. She described the sound of her husband's flag case being knocked sideways. Then she said something that silenced the room. "I am a Brigadier General. I have a Pentagon phone number on speed dial. I have a top-secret clearance and a Bronze Star. And it still took all of that, every rank, every connection, every year of service, just to be treated like a human being in my own home." She looked into the camera. What happens to the woman who doesn't have any of that? What happens to the mother who works 2 jobs and comes home to dozens of officers on her lawn? Who does she call? Nobody answered. The silence said everything. Her testimony was broadcast live. Millions watched. Clips spread everywhere. "Who does she call?" became a rallying cry. A few months later, she launched the Carter Justice Initiative, a non-profit providing free representation to victims of racial profiling and police misconduct. She funded it with the settlement. Within its first year, the initiative took on dozens of cases across Georgia and neighboring states and won most of them. Helen continued her work at the Pentagon. She didn't slow down. She told a reporter, "I didn't survive 2 combat zones to be quiet now." Back in the Oak Hill neighborhood, life returned to something resembling normal. But it was better. The neighbors, who had watched in silence, organized a civilian oversight committee for the new Fairview Police Department. Linda Morrison was elected its first chairwoman. They met monthly and reviewed every complaint. No more sealed files, no more rubber stamps, no more silence. The department hired its first black police chief, a veteran from Atlanta named Captain Monica Bell. On her first day, she told the assembled officers, "This department will protect every resident of this city equally. If that's a problem for anyone in this room, there's the door." Nobody left. The message was received. On a quiet Saturday morning almost a year after the raid, Helen was in her front garden on her knees in the Georgia clay, planting a 4th variety of rose, deep purple, almost black in certain light, a variety called Midnight Justice. Linda walked across the street with 2 glasses of iced tea. She handed one to Helen and sat on the porch step. "New roses?" "New roses?" They sat in the morning sun. The street was quiet. No sirens, no radios, no flashing lights, just birdsong and the smell of fresh soil, and two women sharing iced tea on a porch that belonged exactly where it was. Helen touched the petals of the new rose with her fingertip, gently, the same way she touched the glass of her husband's flag case every morning, with care, with memory, with the knowledge that some things are worth protecting, no matter what it costs. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this one. What would you have done if you were Helen Carter, standing on your own lawn, dozens of officers around you, no phone, no witness willing to step in, just you and a man who already decided you didn't belong? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear it. I want to read every single one. And if this story made you feel something, anger, hope, frustration, anything, share it. Send it to someone, let them feel it too, because stories like this don't change anything sitting in one person's feed. They change things when they move. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications. We're not done telling these stories, not even close. Your home is supposed to be the one place in the world where you are safe. Let's make sure that's true for everyone, not just some of us. This story teaches us a powerful lesson about dignity, courage, and the painful truth that a person's home is not always treated as a safe place when prejudice wears a badge. Helen Carter was not a criminal. She was not hiding anything. She was a retired Brigadier General, a decorated veteran, a woman who had served her country with honor, survived combat zones, earned a Bronze Star, and built a peaceful life with her own hands. Yet, on her own porch, in front of her own roses, she was treated like she had no right to breathe in the house she had earned. What makes Helen's story so emotional is her restraint. Dozens of officers surrounded her. Her home was invaded. Her husband's flag case was disturbed. Her service uniform was mocked. Her classified documents were handled by people who had no right to touch them. And still, she did not break. She did not scream. She did not surrender her dignity to the ugliness thrown at her. She stood steady, because real strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is a calm voice saying, "You are wrong," while the whole world seems to be watching in silence. The deepest lesson here is found in Helen's Senate testimony. If all her rank, service, clearance, and powerful contacts were required just to be treated like a human being, then what happens to those who have none of that? What happens to the mother working 2 jobs? What happens to the elderly man alone in his house? What happens to the person with no Pentagon number to call, no title to reveal, and no camera recording the truth? That question should stay with us. This story reminds us that injustice is not only created by the person who abuses power, it is also protected by the people who watch and say nothing. The neighbor who makes a careless call, the officer who follows an illegal order, the system that seals complaints, the community that waits until the victim is powerful before deciding she deserved respect all along. But Helen turned pain into purpose. She did not use her victory only to punish the officers who humiliated her. She used it to build the Carter Justice Initiative, to fund legal defense for others, and to make sure the next person standing alone on their lawn would not have to stand alone forever. That is the highest form of justice, not revenge, but protection for those who come after you. Helen Carter's roses became more than flowers. They became a symbol of what she refused to let hatred destroy: home, memory, dignity, and peace. What moved you most about Helen Carter's story? Her calm strength, the moment the truth was revealed, or the way she turned injustice into help for others? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about courage, dignity, justice, and truth.